Hello everyone, welcome back to Ramey Works 360. Today we're taking our painted U.S. Infantry that we painted last week and we're going to create a diorama worthy presentation for them. Now, before we touch any glue or terrain, I always start by planning the story. For this scene, I imagine a small American fire team moving down a well-worn path somewhere in Western Europe. The ground is wet, the air is heavy, and the terrain shows the scars of battle, broken branches, churned up mud, and scattered gear. So join me for another adventure in building a diorama base. Let's do it together. This little hill didn't exist a few minutes ago. It started as nothing more than a square of insulation foam, but I wanted the scene to have a story, a place where our infantry could take cover, argue, plan, or fight. So I glued on an extra layer of foam and started carving. I shaped the slope downward so the path feels natural, like countless boots have worn it into the ground over time. Not dramatic, just enough to tell you this land has been used before, long before our squad ever stepped foot here. Now, to break up the smooth foam, I use a simple ball of aluminum foil as one of those tiny tricks that make you feel like a wizard, until you realize you've been rolling a metal potato across a piece of foam for 10 minutes, but the texture leaves behind is worth every second. The walking path is one of the hearts of this piece. I wanted it to look worn down, not from war, but from over time. Those tiny curves, dips, and bumps are what makes a miniature world believable. Real ground is really rarely flat. This is where some of the squad will be walking, running, shouting over the gunfire ahead. A path is a small detail, but it drives the entire layout. It tells the viewer where moments happen and where danger awaits. This is still just foam, but already the story is beginning to form. Details will come later: mud, branches, sandbags, grass, but the foundation of the world is here. Before I added any mud, I decided to place the trees first. One of those choices that doesn't really seem important at the time, but it changes everything. These trees obviously didn't come from a hobby shop, they came from my backyard. Real wood has a randomness you can't fake. I didn't want these trees standing tall and proud. I wanted them broken, blasted apart like they'd been hit by artillery days ago and never bothered to fall all the way down. A friend of mine recommended that I try AK's Muddy Ground, so I'll give it a try. When it came time to add the mud, I didn't start at the path. I started at the top of the hill because gravity always goes first. I worked from the highest point and slowly made my way down. The ground up here feels firmer, less water, more compact. This kind of place where soldiers dug in and walked through. As I moved down the hill, the mud naturally got heavier, softer. This is where water would settle after a storm, and where the earth would start to give way underfoot. Next, I moved to the other side of the path, working my way toward the trees. I wanted the terrain to feel continuous, like it all belongs to the same piece of land, shaped by the same weather and the same history. And finally, the path. This came last because it's the most important. The mud here is thinner, smoother, more compact, worn down by boots and movement. This is where the squad will run, walk, and hesitate. Once the ground was covered, I went back in and started building up the mud in certain areas, not everywhere, just where the earth would naturally collect and hold onto it. And then I grabbed one of the guys, because if they're here, the ground should remember them. I tried to gently press the boots into the mud along the path and the top of the hill, anywhere a soldier would naturally walk or stand. Not every step, not perfectly spaced, just enough to feel pretty real. Well, while the mud was drying, I didn't want to just sit and wait, so I moved on to something else, something the soldiers would actually need. I wanted to build a small defensive position at the top of the hill. Nothing major, just enough to cover a couple of guys to hold their ground while the rest of the squad moved through. I wanted the layout to feel quick, improvised, like it was thrown together because someone didn't have time for anything better. Once I was happy with the arrangement, I glued them together and hit them with the black primer. That dark base gives me an instant shadow, especially in the gaps where light wouldn't normally reach. After that, I sprayed them with khaki. It's a simple color, but it works. The black underneath still shows through just enough to add depth. While the mud was still wet, I pressed the sandbag into place. That way, they don't just sit on the ground, they sink into it, like they've been there long enough to settle. Once everything was dry, the first thing I did was paint the sides of the base black. It's a small step, but it frames the scene. Next came the ground cover. I kept it simple and worked in layers. I started with Woodland Scenics Turf Earth, a solid, neutral base that ties everything together. After that, I added Earth Blend. This breaks things up just enough so the ground doesn't feel flat or uniform. Then I brought in the Green Blend, but carefully. I didn't want grass everywhere, just hints of life clinging to the edges, places where ground hasn't been completely destroyed yet. Up on the hill, where the three guys are firing from behind the sandbags, I added a little bit more earth turf. This area has been worked hard, trampled, dug into. The ground here should feel tired. With the terrain finished, it was finally time to bring the soldiers back in. Each one goes exactly where the story needs them. The shooters holding the high ground, the men moving along the path, the officer and the rucksack guy paused in conversation. I let their boots sink naturally into the train. Nothing dramatic, just enough to remind us they belong here. Now finally, the last step was adding a few more branches to the ground. Fallen debris ties everything together. It makes the trees feel connected to the earth, like they didn't just break, they stayed. And here it is, a small piece of ground shaped by weather, weight, and time. Up on the high ground, a few soldiers hold position, not heroes, not statues, just men doing a job, using what cover they can find. Down below, the path tells its own story, boots passing through here. Some hurried, some paused, the earth remembers all of it. Somewhere between orders and exhaustion, a brief moment to talk. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. I really had a lot of fun building this. Some parts were definitely more challenging than others, but in the end, I got the result I was looking for. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and join me in the next one. Let me know in the comments what your favorite part was, or maybe something I can do better on the next one.